I love this custom of streaming, of getting together to count the Omer, Sfirat HaOmer, this counting of the days from Passover until Shavuos. So I thought maybe today we would talk about some of the layers that have built up around this idea of the Omer over the years, because there are so many layers of Jewish tradition. I remember when I was a kid at CRC that we were really, I think, the only Reform shul in town that the counting of the Omer was done at. And it always stood out to me. It always became a personal practice. Ooh, sorry about that. Always became a personal practice that was really important to me in college and in life afterwards, and was one of the first things Karen and I really did together in our relationship. But so I thought we would go through and talk about all of these different layers. You go back to the Omer originally, and it actually comes from the Torah itself. It is a Torah commandment, a mitzvah from the Torah, just to count these days. And there's not a lot of clarity as to what it is about. Omer itself is a measure of barley, a measure of wheat. Usually barley is associated with the Omer, but it is a measurement. And the Torah tells us to count these days. And I think to understand it, we have to look at what these two holidays, Pesach and Shavuos, originally were. Because originally these are agricultural holidays. It's so clear when you are in Israel, you really feel this. Because, right, Israel really has two seasons, particularly Judea, Jerusalem, really has two seasons, the rainy season and the dry season. And like clockwork, after Pesach, after Passover, it basically doesn't rain again. I mean, well, occasionally a little bit, but it basically does not rain again until Sukkot, the third of these major festivals, which will happen in the fall after the High Holy Days. And then from Sukkot until Pesach, it'll often rain a little bit almost every day. So this is the original idea of the Omer, is that this is some of the most vulnerable time period for an agricultural society. Right, you've gotten your crops in the ground, and now is the moment where you see whether there will be, whether there was enough rain, and whether the rains will come too late and harm the crops, or it'll be too dry, or this is the moment of uncertainty that determines the rest of the year. And so this is probably the origin of the counting of the Omer, this being in touch with the agricultural seasons. And of course, so much of Judaism is about this, from our new moons, which locate us cosmically, to months that really make sense, that are a part of this lunar calendar that balances with the solar. All of these pieces really are about forcing us to be attuned to the cycles of a world around us that is much bigger than anything we can control. So this is the origin of the Omer, but eventually the Omer becomes a mourning period. At least the first 32 days of the Omer become a mourning period. And this takes us back 2,000 years ago to a moment of Roman-occupied Judea. And we have this story. There's this story that says that Rabbi Akiva and his students, and we're told thousands and thousands of students, had a terrible plague during this time period. The plague lets up on the 33rd day of the Omer, Lag BaOmer, but that this terrible plague descended on them and was killing all of Rabbi Akiva's students. And so we still have mourning rituals often associated with this. A lot of folks don't cut their hair or trim their beards, or I usually don't do that. This is my pre-bar mitzvah haircut instead, in honor of the coming bar mitzvah, but normally that's a practice that I have kept myself. But the thing is, this story is not real. There's another layer here. This is a story that is told in code. One of the themes we keep coming back to on Tuesdays in the Story of Us is this idea that all theology is political. It's just as enough time goes by, we forget the politics that influenced it. And very much we see that here. That Rabbi Akiva was one of the main folks pushing back against Roman occupation, was probably somewhat of a messianic figure as well himself. Messianic meaning that he was invested in overthrowing the Roman occupation of Judea. And so we're pretty sure that this story of Rabbi Akiva and the plague is actually a story of Rabbi Akiva's rebellion against Rome. And the language is changed, and it's turned into a plague, both to not get in trouble with the Roman authorities, but also because people didn't know what to do with Akiva. People were worried that this story would spur more rebellion and more resistance, and that it would be the end of the Jewish people, that we just couldn't take that. So we have all of these layers. And then, of course, you keep going and you get into the 1300s and 1400s, and you have the traditions of the mystics, of the Zohar, eventually what becomes Kabbalah. And this is where you get the teachings that Rabbi Jim, I know, focuses on, and Rabbi Karen, or I just call her Karen usually. Karen has been teaching about where you have these 7 qualities, these 7 aspects of the divine. And so since you have 7 weeks and then 7 days per week, they each match up, the 7 and the 7, and it becomes an opportunity for self-help, for Musar. So these are our layers of the Omer. Hopefully one of these we can attach some meaning, some intentionality, some kavanah to as we count these days. You know, the meaning that I always focus on is the idea that Passover is liberation, and Shavuot, the giving of the Torah, is obligation. It's rules, it's society, it's the social construct and the social compact. And moving more and more. And that's what I try to focus on, is what are the ways that I can live a more obligated life? What are the ways that I can do more for the world, for my community, for those around me? What are the ways that I can refocus away from my own freedom and towards what we can bring and what we were created to bring? So let's count. We traditionally don't say the date of the Omer until we count it officially. So instead we say yesterday, the day we were just finishing up, was the 19th day of the Omer. So that should be a little bit of a spoiler for what the coming date is. And we say the blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al sfirat ha'omer. Blessed is the source of goodness that has brought meaning to our lives through obligations towards each other and given us this practice of counting the Omer. Hayom esrim yom shem shnei shavuot v'shisha yamim la'omer. And today is 20 days of the Omer, which is 2 weeks and 6 days in this counting. Take care, everyone. Have a wonderful 20th day of the Omer, Shavuot Tov, and Happy Mother's Day.